Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm ready to talk about the chapter I think we've all kind of been waiting for. The last chapter of our textbook. How do you know what you did, what you set out to do? And this whole chapter deals with testing and evaluation. One of the things that you and I do on a regular basis is test students to see if they're learning. And we'll cover some ways to do that and some methods that you and I can follow so that we can get a good idea how much our students have learned. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. What are some of the ways that we can evaluate student achievement? Well, first and foremost are grades. I don't know how long grades have been given, but I'm sure they probably go back to the Stone Age. But A, B, C, D, and F have been kind of drilled into our psyches as long as we can remember. Or we can also give a numerical value from 100 down to 0. Second, we can reteach. Maybe there's some things you and I didn't cover the first time that our students didn't get. Whenever we give them a test, we can kind of see, oh, wait a minute, they didn't get that concept. And so that gives us an opportunity to go back, reinforce what we covered, reteach it if it's necessary, because let's face it, for a lot of our programs, students are taught sequentially. What they need to know now is something that they're going to need to know later on to build on. So we have that opportunity to do the reteaching if necessary by our evaluation procedures. Advancement. Those of you that teach in the public schools, how do you advance from one grade level to another? You pass all of your LEAP testing or your tests within your grade level. You show some mastery there, then you can move on. Reinforcement. Reinforcement is where we constantly try to get our students to be able to learn that material and learn it so that it becomes second nature to them, and reinforce the need for that information. Because we give that positive reinforcement once they're successful. Then they can move on to more and more complicated things. So those kinds of mastery tests or quizzes, whatever it is, student knows the information, does well on it, it helps to reinforce that they can learn the material and move on and do well. Then we got a couple of terms here that I won't cover in detail because we have a whole class on testing. I want to say it's OCED 2045 maybe, or 2050. Can't remember right offhand what the course number is, but it's all about testing. And we go into really deep detail about test validity and reliability. But for our discussion right now, I just want to kind of say that test validity is asking yourself, is my test valid? Does it measure the content, the skills, the knowledge that I want it to measure? And if it does, then it's a valid test. If it covers stuff that you didn't cover in class, well, then it's probably not valid. Doesn't mean that you can't test on it, But if a student comes across something that they never talked about in class or knew anything about, then really you're not adding any kind of validity to your test. And so you need to really know what kind of content you've covered and build your test on that. Now, reliability is like the opposite side of a coin. Reliability means that it's going to test that information over and over and over again and be consistent in the results. Now, obviously, you and I, whenever we test students, we usually get a test bank of questions with our textbook, and then we use that text bank for a while until they come up with another version of the textbook or another edition. Well, then if the knowledge changes, and let's face it, some of the textbooks that I had in high school in the early 70s obviously need to be rewritten and have been rewritten, because some of the things that I learned, well, we know a whole lot more now than we did back then. And so we need to go back and revise our tests so that they keep giving us good results consistently and that they are valid. And so validity and reliability are kind of like two separate things that we need to look at, but still one affects the other. Objectivity. You know, you and I kind of have our own biases, our own likes and dislikes. But I guess to kind of use this example, and I don't want to pick on our welders, but yet I do remember way back when I first started teaching in the technical college or trade school system, that there were a couple of programs around the state that all the students did were weld on and make barbecue pits. Now, obviously, there's a lot of fabrication and work that needs to get done making pits. But let's face it, there are other things that need to get welded besides barbecue pits. And so we need to kind of be objective and to kind of cover all of our information, not just parts of it, to be objective with it. Those things that you and I are maybe not as confident in teaching, we've got to get to a point where we do feel comfortable, and it's going to take some work on our part, because those things may be important for our students to know. I'm in basically a situation right now that with developmental ed, how we're changing this fall, it's looking like right now I'm going to be teaching some algebra. Well, I haven't taught algebra in literally decades, and so I'm going to have to do some reviewing over the next few weeks so I can kind of stay ahead if my developmental classes make that cover algebra type of material. So it's not like I can just cover what I want. I got to be objective and cover everything. And then practicability. Oh, that's a mouthful right there. Is it practical? Well, one of the easiest ways for us to determine if it's practical is look at if it's done in industry. If we're training students to prepare them for careers, and that information and those skills need to be taught because that's what they'll be doing on the job. And we need to give them every opportunity to master that knowledge and master those skills. It's just really the essence of vocational education. So, what about tests? Now, I believe in objective tests. That's the only kind of test, well, I shouldn't say that. That's 99% of the tests that I give are objective tests, which fall under the categories of true, false, multiple choice, completion, identification, matching, short answer or essays, and then, of course, performance tests. True, false tests, very simple. You have a statement. Is a statement true? Statement false. Multiple choice. You have a statement. Sometimes you can have a blank in it, and then you give them choices, A, B, C, or D, or E, whatever it is. Completion is kind of like fill in the blank, where you'll have a statement and then have a blank there, and the student fills in the missing information. Identification, pretty much where you identify the correct answer from a list, plug it in. I guess that's the kind of difference between completion, where you may not give them the answer, they have to remember it. Identification, they may have like a sheet of words and then the question with the blank in it, and then they just have to identify which word goes in the blank. And then another little different takeoff on that is your matching, where you have a listing of either definitions or words, and then across another list of answers that go to those words or statements in the first column. So you have two columns of information on a sheet of paper, and then you just match one with the other. Short answer or essay work very well if you're out there to trying to find out the depth of knowledge that a student has on a certain topic. It's going to be kind of difficult for them to kind of come up with the right answer if they don't know it, if they have to write any kind of information down to any length. And so this kind of gets to a deeper level of knowledge on the part of a student, that they have to kind of write down steps or go into a discussion over some things. They have to have more than just superficial knowledge, or just maybe a good day of guessing, true or false, or ABC or D. And then finally, performance tests, where they will actually have to perform to some level of competence. And I get back to our colleagues in welding. The student goes out there and brazes or welds two pieces of metal together, and they have to be able to send 25,000 pounds of pressure on them. The instructor doesn't have a problem just sticking it in that hydraulic press and putting the pressure to it. If the student's weld withstands 25,000 psi, they pass. If they don't, go back and do it again. And so those performance tests, they either get it right or they don't. One of the two. little bit about test construction. Your tests ought to line up with the objectives of your lesson. Those important points that you want to get across to the student ought to serve as the foundation for you to build that test. Once you determine those objectives, then you can kind of outline them, put them in some kind of sequence. I kind of like to put my test to cover the chapter material from the first word of the chapter all the way to the last one. So my test questions will kind of follow the flow of the chapter. I just don't go randomly pick questions out. In some cases, I do, but I find it's easier for me to construct tests like that. Then you construct the questions: true, false, multiple choice, fill in the blank, whatever it is, and then you assemble the test. I like to use some testing software. ExamView is my favorite. I've used a variety of test bank software, but I found that ExamView works really well, even when I want to go ahead and create a test from scratch. It's easy to use, and does a wonderful job providing just a paper and pencil test with all of the answer keys and so forth and so on. But it also adapts itself very well for online testing, very similar to what y'all are doing in this class. And in fact, the tests that y'all have taken up to this point were made in ExamView, and I created those tests myself. So I get the blame for them if there's some problems with them, with the questions. But there are just so many tools that you and I have available to us that we didn't have 20 years ago to make test construction a whole lot easier. I remember having to spend literally hours and hours typing up a test. And now, 10 minutes, you can have a test done. So, I highly recommend utilizing test creation software. And there's a lot of them out there that are good. So, what about whenever it's time to give the test? What's some of the things that can happen whenever you tell your students to put away all their things, put your books on in their desks, clean off their desktops, and get ready for that test? Well, obviously their attitude, or they're ready to test. I kind of get on my students about their attitude. They'll say, "Oh, Dr. LeVrier, I'm going to fail this test. Yeah, I can't, blah, 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 blah." Well, I'd say, well, you're halfway there. If you believe you're going to do it, chances are you will. I try to tell them to be prepared, study, do what you have to do, and then say, okay, I'm ready for this thing. I'm going to do my best. And let's face it, I prepared for some tests and I failed them. Now, there was probably a pretty good reason why I did it, and it's usually that I didn't study the information that I needed to. I kind of second-guessed my teacher, saying, "Oh, I think he or she's going to cover this or that," and I didn't cover it all for whatever reason. Well, that's on me. But I always try to at least plant in their mind the seed that's saying, be confident, prepare, and take your test. You're going to be fine. Then distractions. I remember teaching high school. It got to the point that I never tested on Fridays. I never tested on Mondays. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays were the days that I gave my test. During football season, didn't pay to do that on Fridays. Everybody was pumped up for the game. Didn't pay to do it on Monday. We had a whole bunch of absentees on Monday. So I just got it in my head to plan my lesson plans for testing on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and then take it from there, because there were just too many distractions during the school day. Like right now, where my classroom is located, if I'm giving some tests, and we have a number of maintenance people who come from time to time to cut the grass. Well, when they cut the grass on the side of my room, if I'm giving a test, they're going to have a hard time concentrating on that, because that mower makes a whole lot of noise. So I kind of try and find out what's going on, and then kind of give my test where the environment, the things that I can control, aren't a problem. Now, obviously, somebody decides to have a fire drill right in the middle of the test. Not a whole lot that I can do about that. But the things that I can control, I try to take that into account. Cheating, whew, what can I say about that? As long as people have been given tests, people have been cheating. And so how you deal with it is up to you. I try to circle around the room, at least try to kind of stay where I can kind of see everybody, make sure that they aren't looking on each other's tests. And let's face it, I probably don't catch everybody. But I keep telling my students that, you cheat, I catch you, you'll pay the penalty. But cheating will catch up with you sooner or later. And that usually stops a whole lot of it. Instructions, obviously, you're going to need some instructions on the test to kind of tell the student this is, how to make mark your answers. This is the type of questions we're given. So it's just kind of like the mechanics of giving the test. They need to have some kind of instructions covering each one of the question types. And look, even if you give the instructions, sometimes that's not enough. I can remember giving a test, a true-false test, to a class, and one good student missing every one of them. And went back and asked the student, what happened here? All of your answers were opposite. Well, he said he was in a hurry, he wasn't reading it. He said, I thought you wanted to put the opposite answer. And I went back and looked at my instruction. It says, put a T or an F in the blank if the statement is true or false. And somehow or another, he just read it where it was backwards. But you get all kinds of excuses. But put the instructions down, tell them exactly what they need to do. And let's face it, they've taken enough tests that they pretty well know how things work. Supervision, always kind of monitor the test. There may be some students that might have a question about a test, and let's face it, with some of the reproduction technologies we got, sometimes, if you're copying 50 copies of a test, or for maybe 2 or 3 classes, sometimes, something just doesn't look right. Especially if the toner's getting low. A letter might get skipped and they can't read it. And so staying on top of those kinds of things, you can do that. And then I've had this happen more than once, where I took a test bank set of questions and the answer that was given is wrong. So staying on top of that, you can kind of make those changes on the fly and not have to go back and have a whole lot of grief later on. Scoring, look, I'm all about easy. I don't know about you, but I hate to grade papers, especially if I've got 30, 40, 50 students all taking the same test, and I've got to grade all those papers. I've always built my tests for ease of grading and make no apologies for it. Now, somebody can certainly argue that, well, maybe you're not testing to the fullest extent. Well, okay, I'll take the hit on that. But let's face it, I want to be able to get my tests graded and back in the students' hands as fast as possible to kind of reinforce that that learning. And I'll just leave it at that. Score your tests as quickly as you possibly can and get them back to the student. And grading, of course, your grading scale. I know technical college system, community college system uses a 10-point grading scale. Some of the nursing programs have a modified scale, 93 to 100 is an A, 87 I think to 92 or something like that's a B. They just have a higher standard. I think 80 is a C, and 70 is a D for those of us on the 10-point scale. Failing is 59 and below. But given those grades, and also having a grade book that you can go ahead and record all those grades in. I know many secondary schools and many colleges utilize Moodle and other course management systems and software systems that the grades are online. That's a wonderful thing. Students know exactly where they stand. There's no question. Mom and dad know their grades. There aren't a whole lot of questions for principals, teachers, directors, deans, and instructors at the secondary level about what a student's grade is. It's constantly updated. And instead of scoring tests, whenever we give tests electronically, we can spend more time managing the grade book rather than checking papers. Finally, I think this is the last slide, but yet it's probably one of the most important ones: the evaluation of instruction. You and I, as teachers, go through a evaluation process during the year. Our supervisors take part in what is called an administrative evaluation, where they come in, observe our classroom, see if we're doing our jobs, personally, I've always thought that it's more of a dog and pony show. Um, the best administrators that gave me some evaluations were those that would come in unannounced, take a look around, come in and talk to me, see how everything was going, walk the halls. They just didn't stay in their room, come in once or twice a year as prescribed by law, and do their due diligence in observing my classroom, when I pretty much had my students on their best behavior for those 2 days anyway. It wasn't really a very valid assessment of my teaching ability, and a very objective evaluation. So I don't know the answer to this. I don't know if anybody does, but it is a major issue that we all have to deal with whenever we teach in school. We also have student evaluations as part of our teaching environment there in the technical colleges. On one semester, we have a student evaluation that is done that covers teachers, where they'll be asked a bunch of questions about our teaching ability, whether they learned something in the course, about the textbook, the classroom, and all kinds of other things. And then the second evaluation during the year is about the school itself, about the services that are provided. So some of the staff kind of get evaluated with that, and so that's a yearly process for us at the community college level. I always try to have student evaluations that I would make or find in textbooks and so forth for my students when I taught high school. I wanted them to evaluate me. Of course, it didn't amount to anything, but administratively, but I just wanted to kind of know where they stood. Because let's face it, we spent 180 days together. They should have some kind of say about what happened during that time, and so I'd do it. Kind of like the second to last day of class that we had a 40 question evaluation that they did. And look, I got some obscene things said on that, but I did get some really good feedback from some of the students. So finally, you got your self-evaluation. And I think sometimes you and I are probably harder on ourselves than anybody, because we pretty much know if we're doing a good job or not. And so I kind of look at doing a self-evaluation almost every day driving home from work. Did I have a good day? Did I do some things right? Did I do some things wrong that need to get changed? And so that's kind of, since I have about a 30-minute commute, that's a good time for me to kind of reflect on the day and say, okay, did a pretty good job today. Today, you stunk. You need to step it up. And so hopefully you kind of do the same thing yourself. I also like to sometimes get a colleague in sometimes and kind of watch if they had a free period when I had a class. Just kind of get somebody else's point of view. What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? What do you think I need to work on? It's all about improvement, because that's really what that evaluation of instruction ought to be. It ought to be to help you and I to improve and become a better teacher. So that wraps up this this chapter and really all the content from the textbook. What I'm going to do now is shut this lecture down, and I'm going to have one more video for you where I'll cover your final project for the class. You got a couple of weeks now that you can get it done. It's not going to be something that's going to take a whole lot of time, but I hope that it's going to be something that's going to work for you. And that's what I wanted for this assignment. Yeah, I can have you do lesson plans and things like that. And look, y'all probably have that already. And all I've done is just kind of rehash some stuff that y'all already knew. But this little project is something that I think every vocational education teacher needs to do, to stay on top of. And so I'm going to kind of save that for my last little video concerning the final project. And so I'm going to go ahead and shut down right now and upload this thing.